Afternoon, everyone. This is always the horrible slot when everyone's still sleeping after lunch, and so I'll try and do my best Andrew Fern impression and wake you all up. You did a speech at one of our conferences and got everyone dancing after lunch. I won't go that far. So I will quickly present what the Food Innovation Cluster is all about in a few slides, and then I'll talk about a few collaboration examples that we helped set up between food and drink businesses in Norfolk and Suffolk and the UEA and actually other universities as well. So what is the cluster? So since 2021, we've been developing a food and drink innovation cluster for Norfolk and Suffolk. It was funded until June this year by the remnants of ERDF funding that was still in this country. May they rest in peace. And now we are building the business model going forward and turning into a membership organisation for the food and drink sector. It's home to 1,000, Norfolk and Suffolk is home to 1,000 food and drink businesses. Now these are only food and drink manufacturing businesses, not agri-food and not retail and hospitality. And they employ 35,000 people. You will see that there must be some very big employers in that, and there are, but they are kind of ghost organisations that don't have any head office here, and their head offices generally tend to be in New York or somewhere else. And also we have the added benefit of being based in Norwich, next to the Norwich Research Park, which, you know, alongside the UEA, ranked first for food research in the REF 2021, which we're very proud of and very happy to be able to promote that to our businesses. And we champion our member businesses at home and abroad as well. So what do we do? We're a community, first and foremost, so we're the place to call if you have any issues with your business. We're also the place to call if you're an academic looking for a business to work with. We have 250 food and drink members, so if you need a business to do some research or to get, you know, just to work with industry, just get in touch and we can facilitate that. And that's what we try to, you know, we try to promote innovation and research for our businesses to help them grow and help them support them with funding applications and help support their growth, potentially get to Innovate UK funding bids, things like that. So far, what have we achieved? We've got 500 members, of which 250 are food and drink businesses. They're always tag-alongs, you know, consultants and marketing firms and web design and all those people that want to have access to decision makers' email addresses. And then we have also taken businesses to national food and drink expos and given them national opportunities. If you were attending my session this morning, I'd said don't go to national contracts, and this kind of contradicts that. Some businesses do want national contracts to grow. Depends on the business model. We've delivered over 50 events to 1,700 attendees and generated over 40 collaboration projects between industry and academia. This is in the last 18 months. And so we've connected those businesses. 84% of our members said they would join the cluster long term and pay membership. So that's kind of a cool little feedback. So I'll skip through this because I've already kind of mentioned this. We do events, collaborations, and our membership target is 300 by the end of 2025, so we're already more than halfway there. Sorry, I realise I'm speeding through these slides because I've already said all of this, so this is great. Anyway, you'll see that we have unique opportunities for businesses, training and CPD for food and drink businesses. It's kind of key because 80% of our businesses are micro businesses. I think this is kind of really key going forward. They might have started a food and drink business, but actually maybe were an accountant or maybe they were a bus driver. You know, it doesn't matter. They just make a really good product, and they need training to the intricacies of how the food and drink sector works. And the food and drink industry is slightly particular in that regards. And so today, the one kind of unique opportunity I want to talk about is collaborations with students and academics. So I know Sophie will kind of have more high level and more in-depth projects to talk about later. So I'll cover projects that, you know, from the ground up, so to speak. So from very short student placements. So one of the yearly programs that we run through the cluster is working with Deakin University and the Norwich Business School. Groups of students from Australia come across every October for 2 weeks, and they do placements with food and drink businesses. So we manage those placements with those businesses. And it's a 2-week intense group of 5 students, full-time, so, you know, 35 hours a week, with the business, working on the challenge that those businesses have. And now the reason I put this on the slide is that the impact that this has had has been actually very big for these businesses. So we always think, oh, academia can do these long-term research projects, etc. 2 weeks with a group of students has helped these businesses no end. Crumpetorium, you know, those crumpets there, those are her crumpets. She's now moved into her first unit. She's got national contracts in delis. She's also now launched a range of wedding crumpet arrangements. So the students came up with the idea of actually providing crumpets for weddings. That's an example. And so, because generally crumpets are a winter thing, right? You want it, you know, it's nice, you toast it, you have it in winter. And in summer, her business would drop off quite dramatically. By doing the weddings, she's got her summer booked out and she's sold out, and now she's expanded, she's recruiting her first member of staff, and that's snowballing. So 2 weeks of 4 students has completely changed her business outlook. So just wanted to see that even on a small scale, these projects have an impact. I won't go into detail on all of them. We also worked with Norwich Business School and worked with 20 businesses, and each business had a group of 4 or 5 students working on market insights tailored to their business, and that was working with Andrew Fearn's Shopper Insights module in the business school. So all these businesses here had a tailored market insight report. One Planet Pizza is kind of one of the main brands on this slide, actually. You might recognise them. They're in all Asda's across the country now. And basically the report that we produced for them unfortunately led to them closing their small manufacturing unit in Norfolk and contract manufacturing in the Netherlands. But it's actually opened up the European market for them as well. So they've actually outgrown where they were as well. So yeah, if you're in Asda, look out for One Planet Pizza in the frozen aisle. They're vegan pizzas and they are really good. We've also helped develop UEA Masters projects. So these were more individual dissertation projects. Farmyard have Farmyard Frozen. They are a restaurant in Norwich that's quite fine dining. And during COVID, they decided to sell their meals frozen to people and deliver them to keep their chefs in employment, basically. It was so popular that they launched a new brand after COVID, and they now moved into a 6,000 square feet unit in our Food Innovation Centre in Norwich, and they, you know, through this Masters project, they've actually managed to extend their distribution beyond Norfolk and Suffolk. They're now selling through some major London wholesalers, and I think you might start seeing them pop up in your local delis across the country. This is probably one of my favourite projects. So Wildcraft Brewery, they're a business that was set up with sustainability at its core. They want to brew beers with foraged ingredients. Now UEA, we've worked with them on a number of projects actually over the last 2 years. But this one that I wanted to showcase was a student, a master's student working in development, and they wanted to look at our businesses selling their prices in correlation with how much work they're doing for their environmental sustainability. So for a local real ale brewer, you are competing against other real ale brewers that aren't necessarily doing the same work or putting the same money and investment into environmental practices. And so you then have this race to the bottom for pubs for the price of a cask. The owner here on screen, Mike, he wanted to know, am I actually selling my beer at the right price? Am I underselling my product? Because he had an audit done by UEA as well that came back saying that he was net zero with all his practices within the brewery. The energy is from a turbine that's on site, a wind turbine. They grow their barley, they grow their hops. They have a pond for water treatment. They do all sorts of things. Their spent grain is fed to the beef on a farm next door. So are they actually pricing it right? So this report led to him increasing his pricing. It's increased his margin. And actually his customers have taken it on board and it's worked. And that's the difference between him still being in business now when 6 months ago he was borderline going out of business with the cost of living and dry January, which is the bane of all brewers. There's a lot of brewing in Norfolk. Phil, if ever you need a brewery for Rob's Pints later on. But yeah, so we've worked with quite a few of our local breweries. This one you might have heard of. Woodford's a kind of a bigger brewery. And this is, again, a student report, and this has led to a marketing strategy and an expansion strategy for them to move into London, and a rebrand for some of their beers for different markets, and that's going well to date. And then kind of going on to a more high level, and I think this leads on quite nicely to Sophie, so I won't keep talking too long, but Condimentum, you'll know them because they make the mustard for Coleman's, for Unilever, Coleman's of Norwich, of course, and they have one of the 3 ultra-fine milling facilities in the world. The other 2, I think, in America and Canada. So they have state-of-the-art mill, which basically grinds the flour to an ultra-fine particle. However, there is a difference between Canadian mustard grain that they import and UK mustard grain, and it has a different water retention, and it affects the product quality, and it causes issues in the manufacturing process. So through UEA's KE Plus initiative, which is basically a copy of the KTP, the short KTP projects, 3-month project, we funded a 3-month project for the School of Pharma to analyse particle size for them, and that's led to them being able to launch their new retail arm and launch their new products direct to consumer as well, so diversifying their range. Now that they've increased their productivity and reduced the downtime, they're able to start producing more and understand their product better. Got more slides. I think I've got them all on here, so I won't go into detail here, but there's a couple of interesting businesses here. Alt Atlas, they do AI powered solutions for cultivated meat, so we helped them with their business model and their investment pack to go for investors, so hopefully one day they go places, but that's only if you want cultivated steak. That's open for debate. And I think that's all from me. I think that's my contact details there if you want to contact me. Yeah, I'll hand over to Sophie now.
Thank you, Alex. We'll have the panel up at the end for
yes.
Q&A, so we'll come back in again. Thank you.
Excellent.
Well, tell you what, let's go to the beginning.
Yeah.
Right, hi everyone. I'm Sophie Packer, and I'm the Innovation Growth Manager for Growing Kent and Medway, based here at the University of Kent. What does that mean? It means that I work with businesses, academics and local organisations to promote primarily research and innovation in food and drink industries. I'm going to give a bit of background very quickly about Growing Kent and Medway. It's a project led by NIAB at East Malling, the University of Greenwich and the University of Kent, and it's a 5-year project. It was funded by the UKRI Strength in Places Fund, and we were awarded 18 million between the 3 partners. We primarily work with horticultural and food and drink related industries, their supply chain and other sort of supporting businesses within the sector. And how do we do that? So we're looking for growth primarily in research and innovation in technology-driven horticulture, fresh produce packaging, food and drink processing, and enabling technologies. It might be worth mentioning here that the University of Kent was a bit of the new kid on the block when we signed up to this project. NIAB and Greenwich had very established industry partners, whereas here at the University of Kent we had research, but not necessarily those links to industry. We launched this programme in end of 2020, had a bit of a slow start because of COVID and the effects of COVID. And since then we've established a really nice business network, some strong relationships locally within the region. And here is a list of the industry partners that are supporting Growing Kent and Medway through various different streams of the programme, which I've listed. Oh, got a slide missing. Well, that makes my job easier. I was going to list through the sort of mechanisms that we've got for engaging with industry, and that ranges from everything from a mentoring scheme that we run here at the University of Kent to an accelerator to help small and micro businesses scale up production, which is held at the University of Greenwich, to things like funding grants and sort of business support. So a bit about our work at the University of Kent. We primarily work with businesses early on in the supply chain. So looking at growers, mostly fruit growers, but also looking at those producing sort of food, maybe looking at wholesale as well. And we've got some example projects that I wanted to talk through. So as the nature of sort of these collaborative projects, I had invited one of the businesses from Rinter Cherry Tree to come and join us today. They are in the middle of their harvest, and this morning they had a bit of equipment break. So I think this sort of highlights the challenges that we can sometimes have working between business and academia, is actually when issues arise in business, they come first and foremost for them. But I do have a couple of academics who've agreed to sort of jump in and talk about their projects. So the first one I want to highlight is a project with Nashi Gold, looking at hybrid pears and the potential health benefits that they have. So this is a Growing Kent and Medway funded project. It's an innovation voucher, which essentially allows the business to access facilities and expertise here at the University of Kent, but it's partially funded by Growing Kent and Medway. So they first approached us with a very anecdotal challenge, shall we say. They approached us and said, our pear juice cures hangovers. That's a big statement to make, and it was something that we jumped at sort of wanting to look at. We then spoke to them in some more detail and realised it doesn't quite cure hangovers, it maybe prevents hangovers. And there's actually additional nutritional benefits of their pear juice. And so I'm hoping Laurie Fisher, who's working on the project, can come up and talk about it from her research point of view.
So actually, I'm just going to reiterate something Rob said. That it's really great to work with large companies, but they can be quite slow to deliver anything. It's great when they do, because you get a really big impact. But from my point of view, it's much more fun working with a small organisation. You have a lot more flexibility, yeah, they allow the project to evolve, and that's exactly what happened with this project. So originally, we wanted to see, just to do a simple trial where we would look at 2 different storage conditions, 2 different temperatures, and see if that had an impact on the quality of the pear juice. So we wanted to look at things like vitamins, vitamin A and vitamin E and vitamin C, as well as some things like rutin, which have been reported to have really good health benefits. It's only a BIV, so we couldn't look at an international hangover cure in this time, but we thought, well, this is a really good starting place. It's been a great project, but what we found out very quickly is these vitamins, they degrade in light very, very quickly, and they sell their bottles they sell their produce in clear bottles. So we're about halfway through this BIV now, and actually we're going to completely change our direction. So where we were interested initially at those storage temperatures and the impact that could have, we're more interested in what kind of bottle they're going to put it in, because they could find all these things, but then after it goes from being in their cellar to being on a retail shelf, all those things disappear. So we need to make sure that the claims they make hold, and in that way I think we can help them with their business decisions and hopefully help them find a nice, sustainable, recycled bottle that they can put this thing into. And then from this, like I said, this flexibility is great. There's a number of things that have popped up besides that on the way. And so we hope to, in the future, look more into this particular hangover cure. We look at the other things that could be impacting. So the rutin, which we expected to be in really high volumes, we haven't seen. We think this could be down to how it was processed. So we might do another trial where we tweak their processing method slightly and look inside the juice then. Other things. There's so many other little things. I can't really remember them all now. Oh, one of them is dilution. So they make these lovely claims, but this juice is really rich, really strong, and actually they want to be able to sell quite a lot of it. And as it is, you'd probably only want to drink 1 bottle and then you'd be done. So we're looking at things like how could they turn this into mixing it with spring water or something like that and still keep those health benefits so we don't dilute it down too much. Like I said, it's lots of fun because there's lots of different things that we can do with them. and it evolved. That's the great thing of working with a small company. So,
Thank you, Laurie. One thing that isn't included within this slide, and I'm pretty sure the business is more than happy for us to share, is they originally did not grow the Nashi Gold Asian hybrid pear. They were selling sort of a standard English variety, and one of the large supermarkets asked them to grow huge quantities of this on contract that they would sell at their supermarket. They then grew them, and a few years later, the supermarket completely pulled out the contract. So they had these beautiful pears, which are very, very sweet, and maybe not quite right for the UK consumers, which is why they moved over to pear juice. So we're constantly working with businesses that are facing challenges and looking at how we can support them going forward. This leads in quite well. Another project we've been working with is Rent a Cherry Tree, and it was lovely Michael who offered to come and join us today, but unfortunately is in the middle of harvest with technical issues. And they also had an issue with waste, in that the cherries they were growing were not meeting the supermarket grade standards. And believe it or not, it's because their cherries were too big, which seems slightly mad. And I think following on from one of the breakout sessions this morning about can supermarkets do more good, it's a very topical piece. So they've been producing juice as well, which seems to be a very sort of common story for fruit growers in Kent who aren't quite meeting that supermarket grade. One of the things that he has coming out of this juice production is a lot of waste, and that is the stones, the skins, and the pulp. And he originally came to us at the university in Grown Kent and Medway and said, what can I do with all of this waste? There must be some commercial benefits. So we introduced him to Jenny and Marina, who are a couple of academics here within our Division of Natural Sciences, and they were successful in winning a DEFRA Innovate UK funding grant. It was a feasibility study collaboration grant, and they're currently in quarter 6 of the project. I think they've got about 2 or 3 more months left. And what Jenny and Marina are doing are looking at the nutritional benefits and the amounts of anthocyanins within the cherry juice, the cherry powders, and the pulps and the waste, and basically seeing what can be taken to market. Alongside that, Michael at the company has now been generating new products from that. So one of the things he's created is a powder that can go and be sold to ingredients wholesalers, or it can be put into things like yogurts and protein shakes and that kind of thing for additional nutritional benefit and flavour. One of the challenges he has around this is scaling up. So this is something we find quite a lot with our projects, is the research is there and it works, hooray. The initial commercial product is good, hooray. We have issues with scaling up, especially with the facilities within the region here within Kent. And one of the things that Michael and we've been doing is approaching more national companies to see if they have the equipment available to scale up things like his cherry powder. It's not something we do in the UK. It's something that's done very well in Europe, but then we're now looking at cost of transporting it over. So it's something that we're looking at a follow-on project for. We're talking to engineers and technology companies, but I think it's a nice example of sometimes the research works and there's a good product at the end of it, but actually those routes to market aren't always as simple as we think. I'm now going to invite Rob back to talk us through this other project. This is a Grown Kent and Medway project. This is based on Bank Farm, which is the farm producing the net zero egg. And they are a regenerative farmer, and they're looking at the benefits of using biochar within regenerative agriculture. So Rob is one of the academics leading on this project, and I'm hoping he can tell you a bit more from his point of view.
Sorry, it's me again. Yeah, thank you, Sophie. So this morning I spoke extensively about what we're doing with our kind of waste hierarchy and taking it down and getting higher value and lesser value out of it. At the bottom of that, we can still do something with the waste that's left over with that, and that's biocharing. And we can also biochar a whole variety of other things like clippings or anything else that you can take from the farm. You can take these. Simply, biocharing is a bit like producing charcoal. It's in a controlled environment where you reduce the amount of oxygen, so you minimise your atmospheric impacts, and you lock in a much greater form of carbon, which doesn't easily convert back into CO2 and return to the atmosphere. That's great on its own. What we're looking at in this project, working with Regeneration Earth, is looking at how we can change the feedstock and optimise it for their off clippings, but then also understand the impact that that has on the soil health. So we're then looking at taking that biochar and we're going to spread it across the land. We've, as part of our living lab that we set up, they've also got a living farm area that we can run various tests on it with them. And we're going to spread in different concentrations with different land uses on there and then measure over time not only the crop health and things like that, but also measuring our carbon, the amount of carbon sequestered in the soil, looking at the soil microbiome, understanding all of those changes that we have within that. Regeneration Earth's core business, and I didn't talk about this this morning intentionally because it's quite provocative and I've done enough, is selling carbon offsets. So they're actually there as an agriculture business to try and enable that as another resource, a way for businesses, particularly growing business, agricultural businesses, to make another revenue stream by selling carbon offsets. So as part of this, we're working with Regeneration Earth and then extended from that, the UK Carbon Code of Conduct, to develop acceptable MRV protocols to actually measure and verify what's going on, measure and actually understand how much that carbon is being sequestered, and then ultimately potentially even use biochar as a way of sequestering long-term and selling carbon offsets as another revenue stream for farmers. That's about it for me.
Thank you. I'm not even going to bother talking about this project because Rob covered it so brilliantly this morning. I think we've got a couple of other projects here. So this is another Growing Kent and Medway Innovation Voucher funded project, and it's a really exciting project looking at genetics in hop breeding and working with the British Hop Association and Y Hops. And I think a really exciting opportunity that Helen Cockerton within our Division of Natural Sciences has been working on. I'm going to skip over this one as well because I know I just won't do it justice. And this one is also going to be a very quick one just because of some sort of commercial sensitivity around the work. So Sharpak Elsham are actually a corporate business and they create the plastic punnets you see there. So not the strawberries, but they're fully into packaging. And you know that small sort of foam bit that sits under your strawberries to stop them going off just goes to landfill, can't do anything with it. And as a company, Sharpak are looking at how they can be more environmentally friendly, looking at their sustainable practices, and have created one that they believe is compostable. So at the university, we've been delivering tests with them to test the viability of that. And that's all I can say because they're very commercially sensitive about their work. Got some lovely pictures here of our interactions with farmers and growers. So you can see Michael over in the top corner is the cherry farmer that we've been working with, and the project made it onto ITV News, which is really exciting. And we've got Jenny down in the bottom corner there, who's sort of talking through what the cherry pumice looks like and how we work with that. We do quite a lot of events, whether it's on farm, so lots of sort of pictures of us on farm, finding out a bit more about the landscape and the challenges that these farmers are working with. Predominantly, we have farmers and businesses come to us and say, this is the challenge that's keeping me up at night. How can academics support this? It's very rarely us saying, this is our academic expertise, let's go out and see how we can apply it. So it's quite interesting to see how that works. And again, more projects sort of on farm. We've got some sort of field tests there. The Growing Kent and Medway team up in the top corner. Laurie presenting on our bioeconomy and biorefinery plans we've got with Growing Kent and Medway, which will hopefully feed into my next slide. And this is, what is the future focus for Growing Kent and Medway at the University of Kent? So as I mentioned, we were the new kid on the block to this project. We had research, but we didn't have the industry connections, and we certainly didn't have the industry projects. And we're now a few years in, we're seeing the impact, and we're seeing trends and where we can apply that research further. And something that Rob touched on earlier was food waste in this region is huge. And actually we're looking at how we can upcycle that waste and add value to that waste. So looking at sort of a food valorization pyramid, at the top we're looking at how can we extract nutrition from that waste. So things like the cherry project and looking at how we can extract anthocyanins and nutrition from the cherry waste, but also how can we work with the brewers and their spent grain to ferment proteins and things like that. So it's all very exciting. And we can also focus on sort of secondary wastes, so things like alternatives to fertilisers. We've got the biostimulant work we can look at, and also new materials. So what alternatives do we have to plastic that we can generate from this waste material? I've touched on it slightly, and that's the alternative protein sources. Here at the University of Kent, we've got a really successful fungal research group, and we've been working more and more with industry that are looking into alternative proteins to meat. And one of the ways we're doing that is looking at filamentous fungi and the applications there. And then finally, the regenerative farming practices that we're finding more and more across the county and how we can support that. So this isn't an extensive list, and other research and development, industry connections, sort of sector interactions are really fueling change within this sector. And so we're listening closely, and we're working with those partners to see how the University of Kent and Growing Kent and Medway will move forward. That's me for now. So I don't know if it's now worth us moving over to our Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Sophie. Can I ask the panel of what would you like to join standing, please? Just for some questions. Any questions from the audience? Question for Sophie, if you don't mind, Sophie. Just the voucher system at Growing Kent and Medway. Can you explain a little bit about how that works and how effective that's been really at drawing industry into the university?
Yeah, of course. So the voucher scheme, I don't know how many people are familiar with innovation vouchers, but essentially when businesses want to access work, predominantly research and innovation happening at universities, we do charge for it because we are a business, and we need to cover those costs. And actually a lot of the businesses we work with are small and micro businesses, and for them it's just not feasible to cover that cost initially. And so Growing Kent Medway has some drawdown funding from UKRI, which they've set aside for businesses within the region to access. And the businesses basically work alongside our academics to address a challenge or an issue that they have within their business. Most of them are quite technical, so we are looking at sort of the technical sciences and lab-based work rather than sort of business focus. And it allows them to access the expertise, the equipment at a highly reduced cost. So the last round, Growing Kent and Medway paid 75% of the cost for that. We do have another round opening up later this year, early next year. We might change the amounts and how businesses access it, but it's fundamentally looking at productivity and sustainability and that circular economy within farms and addressing those challenges.
Thank you. Any more? Yes.
Yes.
Can you say who you are and where you're from, please?
Oh yes, Flavia from University of Essex. First question out of two. One, how much funding do you provide from the innovation voucher to the companies? So to make a project viable, and what is the minimum, what is the maximum, if it's a range? Second, how do you create awareness within the region that you offer those sort of areas of expertise? Because they tend to be quite niche. How do you get that knowledge to the farmers, to the local businesses?
So first of all, with the innovation vouchers, we do have minimum and maximum amounts. We actually probably went about this the wrong way, so being very open. We compared ourselves to other innovation vouchers running across the country. So we looked at what else was being offered by other research organisations, which was probably wrong for us to do because where I said before, ours a very technical focus is access to large bits of kit and equipment that will have technicians. I think we sort of underpriced how much businesses could access. So for the next round of funding, we're looking at increasing it. The last round, it was minimum of 4,000, maximum of 15,000. The grant went to the research organisations. So for subsidy control reasons, the businesses couldn't access the grant to spend on themselves, but they did have to match it in terms of in-kind contributions. We have other funds available through Growing Kent and Medway. So we have a Business Sustainability Challenge, which is like small seed funding to help businesses look at sort of their own private feasibility studies, which they can involve research organisations in. And then the second question was, how do we sort of get these niche areas out to local industry in the region? So we work really closely with, Kent has a growth hub based in Kent and Medway. We work with the business networks, we work with Produced in Kent. We also have a really large membership. So one of the nice things about Growing Kent and Medway to start with is we were restricted to working with businesses in Kent and Medway, or we saturated that. We are working with as many businesses as we can now within that network, and most of them in our target sort of market are signed up to our mailing list, so they have a very full awareness of what we're offering. And then my role exists, so it's up to me to go out and talk to businesses and make sure I understand what they're trying to achieve, but also make sure they understand what we have to offer. So today I touched mostly upon research and innovation, but it's also letting them know that we have students here that they can access, and actually how can they get involved with our internships and our placement schemes and things like that.
Just to add to that, because I think Sophie's understanding the importance of that role of having these people as innovation growth managers at that interface, it's vital. And Sophie's brilliant at it, and having that's really important to make this work, is having those people who sit at that interface are able to be that point of contact, that network, making new connections, remembering where everyone is, bringing that together. So without it, the network is a network, but that's the real facilitation, and that's the real value that makes the value to what it is for having brilliant people like Sophie do.
Thanks. Did you have an answer?
You covered it succinctly.
Alex, can I ask you, the sector you're working with is very innovative and changing very, very quickly, and how do you cope with that pace of change? Because from my experience, universities are not always the best place at coping with pace of change sometimes. Is that a challenge sometimes?
That's a very good question. Yes, and I guess innovation is relative to each business. So I guess where the university has an advantage is for those smaller businesses that aren't necessarily moving to fast innovation. They need to grow first so we can work and adapt, and that's where student placements come in, I think. So that they're the easy, low-hanging fruit, so to speak. Businesses will always need that. For the faster pace, I think it's a bit of a challenge for the university. There's no glossing over that, I think. However, those short 3-month projects, which have a clear goal, broken down, have had massive feedback from businesses and really good engagement. So the one I showed about the mustard was a 3-month project. It's had a quick impact. That's more working on a business timescale, where okay, in 3 months' time we want this result. We want to be able to then take it and do something with it. They can't sit around for 2 years waiting for results of something. And it's great, but in 2 years' time the business might be out of business with the current economic climate. So I think those shorter projects are really key to then cementing longer-term projects that can look at more in-depth or more, those longer-term innovations. Yeah, maybe, but to start off with, to build the relationship is a gradual process, I think. So that's how we kind of tend to deal with it.
Okay.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, of course you can.
I think the Kent and the businesses we work with is slightly different. So we still have to set expectation between business and academia. Our timeframes are very different. But we work with a lot of seasonal growers who actually, when we're applying research on land, we've got one season of growth. But if you've got a drought like you did last year, that can completely skew results. And actually, for a lot of the farmers we work with, our timeframes, which are normally dictated by the funder, are actually not long enough. So sometimes we'll be working on 2-year projects. Is that enough time to get the right data from farming when you might have 2 cycles of a season? Not necessarily so. And I think where Alex works with more sort of later on in the supply chain and more a different type of innovation, I think there's a comparison there.
Yeah, actually, I forgot to mention one thing, and that's very key, is that, yeah, because we're at the kind of just before the retail stage of things, it's very fast moving. We work very closely with the business school and market insights, and actually Andrew Byrne's access to a lot of data and work at those student placements, and we've produced about 30 or 40 different market insight reports that are generic, that are not tailored to businesses, but are on certain products. So we cover everything from like free from, gluten-free, and just to track what's happening in the market every year. And so it's supermarket data, it's Mintel data, it's all sorts of data sets. So our micro businesses get access every year to updated information, and the supermarket data is live as of 2 weeks ago because it comes from loyalty card data, which is actually unique. So that's a kind of a USP for businesses, which means we can then match what student projects happen for them. So we're not telling them, "Oh, go and do this," when it's a complete red herring, because nobody's buying that. So yeah, we know what people are actually buying, which is what you were mentioning this morning.
Rob, can I ask one question about the big guys, the Crafts, the Nestle, what their approach to working with universities? Is it different, and how does that work in relation to a micro business?
I mean, it's hugely different. Firstly, the nature of the interaction is very different. If you're working with a micro business, the person who's doing the work is also the person who's writing the bid, who's also probably their financial manager, who's everything else. And that puts a lot of burden on them, and particularly when it comes to bid writing or any of those things, that's really, really challenging. And then from an academic perspective and from kind of our support team perspective, it means we end up writing business plans for businesses that aren't part of that in order to support getting bids across the road. Whereas I've been, as you saw this morning, inside and also worked with the large businesses. They have teams dedicated to external fundraising and going through running these bids, and they have that, and they're much more comfortable. And then they'll have a different team focused on looking at this particular science problem that comes along. So it's more challenging in a way because you don't build the same relationship. With a smaller micro business, you build that relationship and they get to know them, and you've carried them through that, and that relationship is from the get-go, if it's funded, is really strong and kind of developed, whereas the large businesses, it's almost much more of a service in that relationship that you get, and so that the expectation and the balance of expectation changes. And so it's harder. It takes a much longer time to develop those strong, really meaningful relationships with big businesses compared to the small ones. And that, for me, is the real marked change.
Can I also add to that? Intellectual property with big businesses is the main difference, I think. I think with smaller businesses, they're keener to see the change overall within their business, and they're quite happy to have more open discussions around intellectual property, things like publishing research, even things like us putting out case studies. So, I skipped over the case study that we have with the large corporation because we are so tied in with the embargoes and non-disclosure agreements and sort of the patents that they have. It's not a bad thing because it does mean that commercial companies are more open to contracted research and consultancy projects. But when we're looking at collaborative R&D and innovation, it can be quite a barrier.
Interesting. Laurie, can I ask you a question? You're out and about, and what's been your reaction to being out there talking to farmers and people, what's it like being out in the field is the question.
I won't lie, it's not fun at the moment. It's a really tough time. It's a really hard time. They're on very. So I work with the fresh produce sector, and I think when you start, the more added value you start having, I was going to say more relaxed, but that's not true. But it's a different environment. But with fresh produce, there's an incredible strain, and Rob mentioned this morning about fertiliser, the cost of fertiliser, the cost of energy. So for all of our apple growers in Kent, they're storing those apples. There's a lot of money going into storing apples. So the last few years, especially with drought, there's a lot more debt in the region, in that area. And a lot of people are carrying things on because they're family farms and they don't want to give up. But yeah, they definitely need support. And I think I remember having this conversation with you a couple of years ago, so where I was really down in the mouth about it. But actually Growing Kent and Medway is a chance for them to get a leg up. And there's things that we can do with them, whether it's a pear juice product or whatever, that can hopefully help them. And Rob and I certainly recognise that it's about secondary income streams. So biorefining, utilising that waste, all of those other things that they can be doing, it's a win-win really, in that they get some more money, but you know, we start improving the environment in the process. But what we have to do is we have to have this good communication, so that they don't see it as a burden and an extra thing they've got to do, and they actually see this as there's some help out there, and that there's some advantages that they can, you know, that they have, that they can take in different directions, and it's not all doom and gloom.
Rob, oh,
No,
yes,
sorry,
no,
I have a
please.
question, maybe it's for everyone. But what could the local governments do to solve this problem? Because every session has been just more on a downward spiral. What would be the ideal scenario?
Well, I'm going to start, then I'm going to pass it.
Yeah, I think everyone has a word on that one. Thank you, it's a good question.
We'll have to wrap.
I think one of the things that they need to do is analyse impact. So I suspect there have been things that have been done in the past that have worked or were working and then were dropped, because typically funding has a limited period. And it can be quite hard to quantify the impact that they were having as on those short scales, on those short time frames. So for things that like improving health, reducing child obesity, those sorts of things, there's campaigns the government run. The Change for Life programme, for example, I mean, it is still there, but it's in the background. But I remember it being on TV, I remember my stepson seeing it and digesting this information. And but how does the government know that my stepson was looking at this and that it was working? And ultimately, those big companies like Kraft, they're going to respond to consumer demand and change. So we need to see that government push, those campaigns, and assess that impact and see what's working. And then hopefully we'll see that the consumer now wants to eat something healthier, and so people start making that thing that's healthier.
I'm going to try and keep a degree of positivity. Short-termism is rife and it's a nightmare, and in anything politics it ruins everything and destroys it. Even this morning with the announcements from Sunak of putting back on net zero guarantees is an example of exactly those kind of things. Focused on short-termism and where the next round of elections are. And that's true with councillors at local level as opposed to anything else, and they're driven by that. And I understand that, and that's the system we live in. That's the negative, and I could rant, but I'm not going to. I'll leave that to Alex. But the positive is, rather like I said with large businesses, the people we interact with, if you get the right people, they are passionate, and they do care in local councils, district councils and whatever it is. They are in a job, probably living within a very limited budget and in really challenging situations. But that's where we can come in to help as universities, as to actually support them. And finding those relationships, and once you get in and actually enable those relationships, there are opportunities and actually it can work. And finding that partnerships is key, but it is challenging because of all of the other environment around there.
I'm also annoyingly optimistic. We're quite lucky here with the University of Kent. We have a really good relationship with Kent County Council and the teams there that engage with food and waste and sort of those circular systems. And I think that is a part of the right people driving the change there, and it's almost those micro interactions we have. But they've been very supportive of other projects. So if we have a farmer that we've been working with says, you know what, we've been doing this project, we want to scale this up now. How can we can use our farm as a test bed. Let's work with other farmers across Kent. We've then worked with the county council who have fully supported it and said, you know what, we'll help with dissemination and knowledge exchange. And actually there's a bit around, I think, learning, especially within schools and younger people, and how can we get them onto farms. And so that's been a really positive interaction, I think. I think we also have to take some of it away from local government. This was mentioned in the morning breakout session I was in, but a lot of farmers that I work with say that Jeremy Clarkson is the best thing that's happened to farming, and they said Springwatch and Country for Old can go in the bin, you know, because people are now more aware of where their food comes from and also the challenges that farmers have. And that's not something that's been led by government or policymakers. That is someone with a very big ego in a television programme. But it has benefited farmers because now farm shops are booming and people are going to pick your own fruit days and they're going along to farmers markets. So as much as I want to put pressure on local government, I also realise how stretched they are, and actually I think for us at Kent are getting a lot of support. That could be because Growing Kent and Medway has had a substantial amount of investment and we're a large partnership. If we were doing it by ourselves as just the university, would we have had the same support? I couldn't say, but yeah, that's my optimistic rant. Now to Alex.
No, I completely agree actually. I don't think local government are the be all and end all of this. I think local government is very supportive within their own means. We are supported by Broadland District Council, which is a tiny district council when you think about it. And they've put their money where their mouth is and helped develop the project for the food and drink industry. When it wasn't necessarily their remit, they did it out of strategy. And there are, as Rob was saying, there's an amazing amount of people within those local authorities that are very passionate about businesses in their districts. My rant is more geared towards the national government, to be honest. And actually, the main strategy is always geared towards either agri-food or manufacturing, and never towards retail and hospitality. And I think that's kind of the first step towards having a sustainable food system, is having that end point where people are buying. And so this is where I go into a rant, because I've got loads of friends in hospitality, and during COVID they were abandoned. So, you know, I spent a lot of time helping a lot of local pubs and restaurants apply for funding and writing their grants for them. It wasn't my job at all, but I just did it on my own time because they were completely panicked during COVID. What do I do? I can't stay open, my pub's going to close. They transitioned to become delis, and now they're selling local products. You know, a lot of people had to be able to be open and get some money coming in to pay the mortgage on their pub or on their restaurant. They had to do that. And there was no support for them, nothing. So, firstly, that's my first rant, is supporting that hospitality and the retail sector. And if we don't have that output where people are selling products, well, the manufacturer's got nowhere to sell their new artisan product. And then if we don't have the manufacturers making the products, then there's no one buying the produce from the field. So, you know, we're completely omitting one huge sector of the food and drink industry, really, in my mind. So that's where government could do more, and local government could do more on that as well, I think. But I mean, I'm trying to keep that quite quite positive.
There's definitely talking about national.
Yeah.
There's definitely a big gap, I feel, between us and policy, and we need to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
There's a number of issues around labour, particularly when it comes to fresh produce and the cost of that. I don't think the answer is just providing subsidies. You know, these are long-term issues, probably. Hopefully, the energy issue, the war in Ukraine, will become easier over time. But I don't think just throwing money at it. It involves a really considered, thought-out policy as to what we do. And as Rob mentioned before, it's circular economy. It's really the approach that we should be looking at and taking seriously. And I don't feel it at the moment.
No.
I'm so negative. I'm sorry.
No, I think it's, you know, the complexity of the food supply chain and how it works and how it's regulated, and some of the pricing is I think we all sense from today and hearing Rob at this meeting, is not functioning as well as it could or should.
With policy, it's everyone here. We can all do something in that regards. Everybody probably knows somebody that either works directly in policy or is engaged from time to time or goes to a policy conference, or, you know, and you need to stand up in your Q&As, you know, and really be heard.
Just a question for all of you, it's the same question. What excites you? What's the next great area of opportunity for universities, Alex? And, you know, what do you see? What's your vision in 5 years' time? What the vision of research and innovation and how that works with industry? Different sectors go through this at different paces. They get different degrees of funding. You know, what's your vision of what food and drink should look like in 5 years' time? And how can the university help deliver that? Sorry, that's a difficult question.
I passed it to Alex because I'm more pessimistic. I thought I could then lighten it up. But actually, you said funding. This is a real niggle of mine. A lot of the DEFRA funding, Innovate UK funding that comes through, especially for farmers, is so hard for them to access. The requirements, so one of the things me and Alex were talking about was business size. For farmers, a lot of them we work with are generational family-run farms. They have to have a certain requirement of however many people will work full-time. It can't include seasonal workers. It makes it really hard for them to access. And then DEFRA and people like Innovate then release this funding in September when it's middle of harvest for everyone, which I mean, I think for us as a university it works well for us because it means we play a larger part in supporting that application process going through. And I know both Rob and Laurie and myself, we've all been involved in this process and putting in a grant application with a farmer in sort of September, October is a very different experience from doing it in February when actually that is their downtime. And we have fed this back continually to the funders. You know, if you're going to do sector-specific funding, talk to the sector when they can access it. It's such a barrier for so many of those businesses. But I think us as a university, because we've sort of been dragged into this problem of accessing funding alongside with them, we've been able to raise our voices too. So I think some of the farmers we worked with would probably have sort of just ignored it, not done anything, whereas we go directly to the funders and say this really needs reviewing for the sector. Yeah. So that's my rant done. And then the future of what the universities can do. I've touched on it over and over. Growing Kent and Medway was a real opportunity for the University of Kent because we didn't have those business connections. But likewise, a lot of the businesses here within the region were innovating, but anecdotally, and they didn't. I don't say they didn't realise. They did realise what they're doing. They're business people. They're very capable of doing it. But actually, within the university, we can look at the research and the data. And one of the things we now have is a really nice portfolio of case studies, and businesses are now understanding. So regenerative farming, for example, is still quite new to a lot of businesses, despite it being very old practices. And a lot of the more conventional farmers are saying, well, we want to wait and see the smaller farmers do it, see if they fail, see if they succeed. And here at the university, we can work with them to demonstrate what does or doesn't work. We can provide the data, we can publish reports, and I think other farmers will then follow suit. So I think it's an opportunity for the universities to be sort of place changers, but it is at a slow pace. So, yeah.
Yes, so in 5 years' time, my hope would be that the F in DEFRA actually covers food manufacturing for a change, and they stop sending it to Department of Levelling Up and then back to DEFRA and whatever, because that doesn't help. I'll start with that rant and then go on to positive. I think in 5 years' time, firstly, I think, as you say, for Growing Kent and Medway, it's the same for us as a cluster, is to be sustainably supporting businesses. And so the kind of a positive outlook here is that we can do something, and we're doing 50 collaborations a year, helping, so working with 200 businesses a year. If we continue doing that, then in 5 years' time, that's potentially 1,000 businesses that we've supported. That's going to have a massive impact on them, the local economy, and if we can. So this is kind of stuff that I'm developing at the moment, the business model for the cluster, but hopefully in 5 years' time that is up and running. So that's my optimistic outlook, and linking in with bigger industry as well. So it's growing, but again, that takes a lot more time. As you were saying, developing that relationship. It's not 2 years, it probably takes 3, 5, 6 years to develop a strong relationship with a big industrial company. And I think as a university, and I guess it's probably the same for Kent, and with Growing Kent and Medway, you've got that partnership there with some kind of big players. And that helps cement your place in the sector and grow that project. I think that's what we need at UEA, and hopeful that it will happen and have a partner that can then drive that innovation and drive the sector.
Cut the mustard, as it were, so to speak.
Well, cut the mustard, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Maybe, although that's Unilever, so talking about having the worst company to develop a relationship with, potentially. Bingo.
I'm just sort of take it from a research perspective, really. I think maybe not in 5 years, but further down the line, as it stands, I think our food systems are going to split into 2 pathways, as is. They might not do. And one of that being wonderful, nutritious, lovely food, which not everyone can afford. But we still need to feed lots of people. And we've still got factory farms and things like that which need to improve their sustainability records. So, yeah, we're in a lovely situation at the moment where we can help, especially being in Kent, lots of small businesses that get wonderful ideas and we can do some wonderful things. But what I hope to see is that then those demonstrations of success feeding in to that mass food production.
Not a lot left for me to cover. Absolutely, I agree with Alex. I mean, I think public-private partnerships, sustainable ones, is the future, and that is where I hope it sits, and that and making that sustainable and finding a business model that works to make that sustainable is the challenge. But I think that is the only way to make that work as a sector. And the other advantage, building on Laurie's point about working, and Sophie's actually working with a lot of small businesses, is the opportunity that they can compete if they work together as a consortium. And I'll take the waste example that I gave this morning as an example. Individually, their waste isn't that much, and they probably could do a very localised circular economy. But as a collective, there's then justification to setting up a regional biorefinery where they can then sell all of their high-value products regionally to people who need it. But that only works if you bring them together. So it's building these networks and then allowing them to earn that value. And I'd love to see examples of that regionally. Ideally in Kent, doing something we're trying to do.
Should we devolve the research funding, Rob, because it will solve some of the issues that perhaps Sophie's talking about, letting that funding go at the right time and adapting to the local agenda rather than having national research funding?
Yes, I'd love that. But and that's within reason what things like Growing Kent and Medway are trying to do. And so that maybe Growing Kent and Medway, if we'd started it again, we maybe have thought about some of the funding a bit better and learned. I mean, we've learned a lot in how we deployed the funding and think in the early rounds. But I think the model works, and I think it does mean that you at least can target it and pivot it to where it has greatest value for a reason. So yes, absolutely, more of those things and better funded, and strategic follow-on funding where there's demonstrator is the other thing.
Yeah.
Coming back to policy, there's this great thing of having a flagship and then leaving it to rot.
Yeah.
The Welsh biorefineries being a great example of that, where they were funding, then nothing. They promised there was going to be follow-on to nothing, and Laurie, I'm sure, could speak to that. And so that joined-up approach to do that, I think that's then adds real value. But yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. If there's no more questions.